Are you comfortable? Good. Just settle down a little. Wiggle your toes if you need to. Find a nice soft spot for your head. Take one big, slow breath in and let it out gently. There's no hurry tonight. We have nowhere to be and nothing to do. We're just going to drift along together, you and I, on a very soft and sleepy story. And by the time this story is done, well, you might just find that your eyes have decided to close all by themselves. Tonight, we're going to think about bears. Big, soft, round, rumbling bears. We're going to think about what bears do in the wintertime, when the days get short and the air gets cold and the whole world slows down and gets quiet. We're going to follow one particular bear. Let's call her Rosie, because that feels like a warm and comfortable sort of name. And we're going to stay very close to her as she gets ready for the most marvelous, most cozy, most deeply restful sleep you can possibly imagine. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Very gently. It starts in autumn. You'd know autumn even with your eyes closed, actually. There's a particular smell to it. Something like apples and cold air and the dusty sweetness of dried leaves. And there's a softness to the light, as if the sun has decided to take things a little easier before it goes to bed for the winter. The days get shorter. You notice, if you're paying attention, that it's dark a little earlier each evening. And then one morning you wake up and there's a chill in the air that wasn't there before, and the leaves on the trees have started to go gold and orange and red, like tiny flames catching slowly. Rosie the bear notices all of this. Bears are very good at noticing. She notices the way the light changes. She notices the way the air smells different. Something deep inside her body, something old and wise and very clever, begins to whisper to her. And what it whispers is this: it's time to eat. Now, Rosie already eats quite a lot. Bears do. They spend most of the day looking for food, eating food, thinking about food, going somewhere else to look for more food. But in autumn, something extraordinary happens. Rosie starts eating an enormous amount. Not just a lot, not just more than usual. We're talking about eating all day long, from the very first light of morning until it's too dark to see. We're talking about eating so much that, if you were watching her, you'd probably start to feel a little full yourself just from looking. This special kind of autumn eating has a long name. Scientists call it hyperphagia, which sounds very serious and impressive, but just means eating a lot, which isn't quite as impressive when you put it like that. Isn't that funny? Sometimes the biggest words just mean the simplest things. Rosie can eat 20,000 calories in a single day during autumn. Can you imagine that? A grown-up person usually eats somewhere around 2,000 calories in a whole day. Rosie eats 10 times that. She might eat 40 pounds of food in one day. 40 pounds. That's roughly the weight of a medium-sized dog, eaten in a day. Just in food, which is a rather astonishing thing to think about. And what does she eat? Oh, all sorts of things. She loves berries more than almost anything. She'll find a berry bush and just stand there, unhurriedly pulling the berries off with her big, careful lips, eating and eating and eating. She loves nuts too, acorns and hazelnuts and beech nuts, crunching them slowly. She'll eat grass and roots. She digs up with her enormous, strong claws. She'll find a river and stand very still in the cold water, waiting for a fish to swim past. She'll tip over logs to find insects and grubs hiding underneath. She'll find a wild bee's nest, very carefully, and eat the honey inside. She's not in a hurry. She never rushes. She just moves through the autumn forest slowly, eating, resting, eating a little more. The forest is very quiet around her. The birds have mostly flown away to somewhere warmer. The little animals are gathering their own food and tucking it away. The trees are letting go of their leaves one by one, letting them drift down to the ground and settle in soft drifts of gold and brown. All this eating is doing something important. Can you guess what it is? It's building up a thick, warm, beautiful layer of fat all around Rosie's body. The fat goes on slowly, day by day, week by week, until Rosie is properly plump and round and splendidly cozy looking. This fat isn't just to keep her warm, though it does that too. This fat is her food. It's stored food that she'll be eating. Slowly, slowly, all through the long winter months while she sleeps. Isn't that wonderful? Her own body becomes a kind of larder. She tucks the food away inside herself, and then she sleeps, and her body very quietly and very slowly uses it up while she dreams. By the time November arrives, or sometimes October if the weather turns cold early, Rosie starts to think about her den. A den is a bear's sleeping place, her bedroom for the winter. And bears are surprisingly particular about their dens. They don't just flop down anywhere. They look around quite carefully, the way you might look around for the perfect spot to have a nap on a Sunday afternoon. Some bears find a natural cave tucked into the side of a rocky hill. The cave doesn't need to be very big, just big enough for one bear to curl up inside, out of the wind and the rain and the snow. Some bears find a hollow in the roots of a very old, very large tree. The kind where the roots have made a sort of room underneath, with a low ceiling and soft earth on the floor. Some bears dig their own den, which takes a great deal of work, but means everything is exactly right. When Rosie finds her den, she does a little bit of decorating. This always seems rather sweet, doesn't it? A great big bear quietly making her bedroom comfortable. She brings in dry leaves and grass and moss and bits of bark, and she arranges them carefully into a soft bed. She pats it down with her big paws. She turns around and around in it, the way dogs do before they settle, until the shape of it is just right. Then she goes out and eats a little more, and comes back and adjusts the bed a tiny bit, and goes out and eats a little more again. The den needs to be sheltered from the wind. It needs to be hidden so that nobody disturbs her while she sleeps. It needs to be dry because sleeping in a wet bed is not comfortable for anyone, bear or otherwise. And very importantly, it needs to stay cold, but not freezing. Bears actually do better when their den is just below freezing or right around freezing, because that helps their body slow down in exactly the right way. When everything is ready, when the days have grown very short and the first real snow has started to fall, Rosie goes to her den. She settles down into her soft bed of leaves and grass. She curls up, nose tucked under her tail like a great big comma, and she closes her eyes. And then, slowly, slowly, over the next few days, she falls into the deepest, most marvelous sleep. Here is something extraordinary. When Rosie goes to sleep for the winter, her whole body changes. Let me tell you about her heart first, because her heart does something remarkable. Normally, a bear's heart beats about 40 or 50 times a minute. Boom, 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 boom. That's slower than a person's heart. A person's heart usually beats around 70 times a minute. But when Rosie is deep in her winter sleep, her heart slows down to somewhere between 8 and 10 beats a minute. 8 to 10. Sometimes even fewer. Sometimes her heart will beat and then pause. And then beat again with such long, quiet gaps in between that if you were listening to it, you might hold your own breath in between beats. You can feel your own heartbeat if you put your hand on your chest right now. Boom, 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 boom. Isn't it a steady, gentle thing? Now try to imagine a heart that beats that slowly. Boom, 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 boom. Like a very slow, very peaceful drum playing a song for sleeping. Her breathing slows down too. She might take only one breath every 45 seconds. One breath, and then a long, long pause, and then another breath. When she's very deeply asleep, there are moments where she seems, to any watching eye, to have almost stopped breathing entirely. But she hasn't. She's just breathing so slowly, so very slowly, that it's hard to see. Her body temperature drops a little. Not as much as some other animals who hibernate. We'll come back to that in a moment, but enough. Her whole body is running on the lowest possible setting, turned right down, like a lamp on its dimmest setting, giving out just enough light to find your way by. And here's a fascinating thing. You know how, when you sleep, you need to eat and drink during the day because sleeping uses up your energy? Well, Rosie doesn't need to eat or drink anything at all while she's in her den. Not a single thing. For 4 months, 5 months, sometimes 6 months, depending on where she lives and how cold the winter is. She doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't do anything except breathe very slowly and dream very slowly and let her body tick along on its stored fat, quiet as a candle flame in a still room. She doesn't even need to get up in the night the way you sometimes do. Her body is so clever that it recycles everything. Nothing is wasted. She just sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. Now, this is where things get a little interesting and just a tiny bit surprising. You might have heard that bears hibernate. And that's true. They do. But there are some animals who hibernate even more deeply than bears. Little creatures like ground squirrels and dormice and some kinds of bats go into a sleep so deep that their body temperature drops almost to freezing. They become barely warm at all. Their hearts slow to just a beat or two per minute. You could pick one up in your hand and they wouldn't notice. This very deep sleep is what scientists sometimes call true hibernation. Bears are different. Bears can wake up. If something very important happens, something that really needs their attention, a bear can come out of her winter sleep. It takes a while, and she'll be very groggy and slow when she does, but she can do it. In fact, if you very carefully and very quietly went to Rosie's den in the middle of February and sat just outside the entrance, and if you listen very hard, you might hear her breathing, slow and soft. And if you came back on a warmer day, you might notice that she had shifted position slightly, or that she had scratched the side of the den. She's not completely still. She's deeply, deeply asleep, but she's not quite as still as a stone. Some scientists, because of this, call what bears do torpor rather than hibernation. Torpor just means a very deep, slow, sluggish kind of sleep. Other scientists say it counts as hibernation, just a different kind. They debate this cheerfully among themselves, which is something scientists rather enjoy doing. For Rosie, none of this matters very much. She's asleep. She's warm in her leaf bed. The snow is falling softly outside her den and covering the entrance with a white blanket. And she dreams. What do bears dream about? Nobody knows, of course. But it seems quite likely that they dream about berries. Warm summer berries, sweet and dark. And perhaps about rivers with fish flashing silver in the sunlight. And perhaps about walking through long golden grass on an easy afternoon with nothing to do but be a bear. Now here is perhaps the most astonishing thing in this whole story. So astonishing that you must stay awake just a little longer to hear it. If Rosie had cubs last spring, or if she is about to have cubs, something extraordinary happens in the middle of winter while she is deep in her sleep. The cubs are born. In the very darkest, coldest part of winter, while the snow is deep and the world above the den is silent and still, tiny bear cubs come into the world. And when I say tiny, I mean truly tiny. A bear cub at birth is about the size of a large banana, maybe a little smaller. A grown-up bear might weigh several hundred pounds. Her cub at birth weighs less than a pound, a single pound. Can you imagine? This enormous, powerful, cozy round bear, and tucked against her are these two tiny, warm, almost hairless, completely helpless little creatures, each one no bigger than your forearm. The cubs are born blind. Their eyes are sealed shut. They can't hear very well either. They can't walk. They can't do anything really, except one thing. They can find their mother's warm fur and snuggle in close, and they can feed. And Rosie? Sleeping. Rosie. Deeply dreaming. Rosie wakes up just enough to help them. Not all the way awake. Not out of her den, not looking around, not up and stretching. Just barely, gently half awake. She shifts, she adjusts, she pulls her cubs closer with her great soft paw. Then she drifts back down into sleep. The cubs feed and sleep. Feed and sleep. They grow slowly warmer and slightly more round. Their fur grows in, soft as anything. They stay tucked against their mother's belly, as warm as toast, while outside the den, the winter wind blows and the snow piles deeper, and the world stays cold and still. Isn't that just one of the most beautiful things? These tiny creatures, born into the warmest, safest place in the whole forest. No cold air, no wind. Just the soft breathing of their mother and her warm fur and the quiet dark. While Rosie sleeps, let's have a gentle look around at the winter world outside her den. The forest is very quiet. In summer, a forest is full of noise. Birds calling, insects buzzing, leaves rustling in the warm wind, small animals scurrying in the undergrowth. But in winter, the forest rests too. Not everything sleeps the way Rosie does, but everything slows down. The trees have let go of their leaves. The branches stand bare and dark against the gray sky, making beautiful lacy patterns. The bark holds a thin coat of frost on cold mornings, so that even the tree trunks seem to glow slightly white and silver. The ground is covered in snow, deep, soft, muffling snow, so thick that footprints from last autumn are long gone, and the forest floor is perfectly smooth and unmarked in white. Every sound is softened. If a pine cone falls, it lands without a thud, just a soft thump in the snow. If a branch bends under its weight of snow and then springs back, flinging the snow off in a little shower, the shower of snow falls soundlessly, like powdered sugar through still air. The air tastes clean and cold and faintly of pine trees. Here and there, a tiny bird, a chickadee or a nuthatch, hops along a branch, looking for seeds tucked into bark crevices. These brave little birds don't migrate and don't hibernate. They stay in the cold forest all winter, keeping warm by fluffing up their feathers into perfect round balls of insulation, their little hearts beating away rapidly even in the coldest air, because that's what works for them. Deer move through the forest sometimes, slowly, leaving neat pointed tracks in the snow. A fox, red and quick, trots along a path it knows, its thick tail trailing slightly. Beneath the snow, in a network of tunnels they dug before the first freeze, little voles and mice and shrews go about their small, busy lives, perfectly insulated from the cold above. And somewhere in the hillside, tucked under the roots of an old spruce tree, or deep in a rocky cleft, is Rosie Sten. There is a small, dark opening in the snow, barely visible. And if you knelt down and put your face near it, you might feel the faintest warmth drifting out. The warmth of a sleeping bear and her growing cubs. All is well. All is deeply, perfectly, quietly well. Let's think, just gently and without rushing, about how Rosie stays warm while she sleeps. It's that beautiful fat mostly. The fat she built up all autumn with all her eating. Fat is one of the very best insulators in nature. It traps warmth and holds it. When you're cold and you hug yourself, you're pressing your arms against your body to keep the warmth in. And Rosie's fat is doing something like that, all around her whole body, all the time. And then there's her fur. Bears have extraordinary fur. 2 layers of it, actually. There's a soft, dense undercoat close to the skin. This is the layer that traps warm air, like a down duvet. And then there's the longer, coarser outer coat of guard hairs, which sheds water and protects the soft layer underneath. Together, the 2 layers make an insulating coat that is rather magnificent. On a cold morning, snow can settle on a bear's back without melting, because the fur is so good at holding the bear's own warmth in that almost none of it escapes to warm the snow on the outside. Isn't that clever? The bear is warm inside, and the snow sits politely on the outside, not melting at all. The den itself helps too. The earth and rock and snow surrounding the den all act as insulation, holding in any warmth and keeping out the worst of the cold. And the small entrance, just big enough for Rosie to squeeze through, means that cold air can't easily blow in and disturb things. It's like being inside a pocket, or a folded up blanket, or a very cozy hat. And Rosie's body is doing its part too, quietly and cleverly, using just the smallest trickle of energy from her stored fat to keep her heart beating and her lungs breathing and her blood moving very, very slowly. Her body has become extraordinarily efficient. It wastes almost nothing. It does almost nothing. It just ticks. Just barely ticks along, like a clock wound so loosely that you can barely hear it. It depends, you know. Everything in nature depends. A bear in Alaska, where the winters are very long and very cold, might sleep for 7 months. From October until May. Seven months is quite a long time. If you slept for 7 months, you'd miss autumn, winter, spring, and wake up in early summer. That's most of a year spent asleep. A bear in a warmer place, like parts of California or the American South, might sleep for much less, maybe 3 or 4 months, or even less if the winter is mild. And actually, some bears in warmer climates don't go to sleep at all in the winter, or only sleep for short stretches. Because if there's food to be found and the weather isn't freezing, why sleep? What decides when a bear goes to sleep and when she wakes up? Temperature matters a lot. The shortening of the days, the way the light fades earlier and earlier, gives her body a signal that winter is coming. The cold matters. When the temperature really drops, something inside Rosie says, now is the time. And she goes. And in spring, something similar happens in reverse. The days get longer again. The temperature rises, very gradually. The light changes. And something inside her, that same old wise something that told her to eat in autumn, starts to whisper again. And what it whispers this time is, wake up. Spring is coming. It comes so gently, so slowly, that you might almost miss it at first. A degree or two warmer. The days just a little longer. The light a tiny bit softer. And somewhere in the forest, in the hillside, in the dark earth, Rosie begins to stir. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in stages. Her heart begins to speed up, slowly. Over several days, it might go from 8 beats a minute to 15 to 20 to 30. Her body temperature rises slowly. She breathes a little faster. She begins to move, shifting in her den, her great paws stretching out and pulling back. She might stay half asleep for a week or more, coming awake a little more each day. Her cubs by now have been growing steadily for weeks. They're not tiny anymore. They're small. Maybe the size of a large cat. But they're covered in soft fur, and their eyes have opened, and they can move around, and they've been exploring the small space of the den with great curiosity. They've been watching the world with their new eyes, which are dark and bright and full of that particular wonder that belongs to young creatures discovering everything for the first time. When Rosie finally comes properly awake, she spends a little time in the den, gathering herself. She's very hungry. Hungry in a deep, bone-level way that you might feel after missing a whole day of meals, but much, much more so. She hasn't eaten anything at all for months. Her fat reserves are mostly used up. She's thinner now, noticeably thinner, though still large and bear-shaped. She moves toward the entrance of the den. She sniffs the air. And the air that comes back to her is something wonderful. Wet earth and snowmelt and cold water, and something green, some faint trace of growing things beginning to push up through the ground. The smell of spring. She pushes out of the den, and there is the world. The snow is melting. Not gone yet? There are still patches of white in the shadows under the trees. But the ground is showing through in places, dark and wet and rich. The sky overhead is pale blue, the kind of blue that means the days are getting longer and the light is coming back. A bird is singing somewhere in the trees. Just one bird, but it's enough. The forest is waking up. Rosie stands in the cool morning air and blinks and stretches and probably yawns the most enormous yawn in the world. And her cubs come tumbling out after her, bumping into each other and into her legs, sniffing everything, looking at everything, completely amazed by this huge, bright world they've never seen before. Rosie leads them away, slowly and carefully, in search of the first food of spring. In early spring, bears eat things that don't take much energy to find. They're hungry, but not yet at full strength. They eat soft green shoots, pushing up through the mud, sweet and tender, like the very first things the earth has to offer. They eat roots. They find the carcasses of animals that didn't make it through the winter. Not a pleasant thought, but very important to bears who waste nothing. They look for the dens of ground squirrels and other hibernating animals still sleeping underground. They dig at soft riverbanks where the earth has thawed. They move slowly, conserving energy, eating a little here and a little there. The cubs stay very close to their mother. Everything is new to them. Every sound makes them stop and look. A falling leaf, a crow calling. The sound of the river. Their mother nudges them along, patient and steady, teaching them without words, "This is safe, this is food, follow me." As the weeks go by and the spring deepens, the forest fills back in with green. The trees bud out, and then the leaves open, pale and bright at first, then darker and fuller as the days get warmer. The birds come back. The insects come back. The berries begin to form little hard green dots that will slowly ripen over the summer into those sweet dark berries that Rosie loves so much. By summer, Rosie is eating well again. By midsummer, she and her cubs are making the most of the long, warm days, fishing and foraging and playing and resting in the shade of the trees on hot afternoons. The cubs are growing fast. They tumble over each other and roll down gentle slopes and practice climbing trees, and generally have what appears to be a very pleasant life. And somewhere in the back of Rosie's mind, or maybe in that deep, wordless, wise part of her that knows things without being told, the cycle is already waiting to begin again. Summer will end. Autumn will come. The berries will ripen, and the nuts will fall, and the days will shorten. And she'll eat, and eat, and eat, and then she'll go back to her den or find a new one, and she'll curl up and let the snow cover the entrance, and her heart will slow down to almost nothing. And she'll sleep. While we're being quiet and sleepy tonight, let's just wander, very gently, through a thought about all the other bears in the world. There are 8 kinds of bears, living in different parts of the world. Rosie is an American black bear, one of the most common. But there are brown bears, the great grizzlies, sleeping in their dens in Alaska and Siberia and the forests of Europe and Canada. There are polar bears who are different from the others. Only pregnant female polar bears go into a winter sleep, and they do it in snow dens on the sea ice, which seems a very cold place for a bedroom, but works perfectly for them. There are sun bears in the rainforests of Southeast Asia, small and dark with a golden patch on their chest like a little sunrise, and they live somewhere so warm that they don't need to hibernate at all. There are spectacled bears in South America, named for the rings around their eyes that make them look like they're wearing glasses, which is a very endearing look for a bear. And giant pandas, who many people are surprised to learn are indeed proper bears, eating their bamboo year-round in the cool mountains of China. Each one has found its own way of living in the world. Each one does what works for its particular place, its particular climate, its particular food. bears have been doing this for millions of years, long, long before there were people to watch them and wonder at them. Long before there were children tucked into warm beds listening to stories about them. Long before any of this, they were there in the forests, sleeping and waking, eating berries and catching fish and curling up in their leaf beds while the snow fell. Just being bears, quiet and enormous and impossibly well adapted to the cold, cold world. But let's come back to Rosie, because I think she's the one we know best now. Rosie is in her den. It's the very deepest part of winter, the place we call the heart of winter, when the cold is most complete and the nights are their longest and the world is most quiet. Rosie's breathing is slow as a dream. Her heart beats 8 times a minute. She is warm. She is curled up perfectly. Against her belly, her cubs. Let's say there are 2 of them, because 2 seems like a warm number. Are sleeping, 2, growing steadily, safe and fed, and completely unaware that outside the den, the world is cold and dark and deep in snow. Everything is still. Everything is quiet. The snow has mounded over the entrance to the den, and there's just a small hole where her breath rises in the faintest wisp of steam. If you stood at the edge of the forest and looked very carefully at the hillside, you might see it. That tiny curl of steam, barely there, rising and fading, rising and fading. That tiny rising breath is Rosie. Sleeping. Safe. Waiting for spring. And that's rather a lovely thought to end with, I think. The idea that right now, while you're lying in your warm bed with your eyes getting heavier, somewhere in a forest, in the mountains of Montana, or the boreal forests of Canada, or the hills of Norway, or the hills of Norway, or the old-growth forests of Romania, there are bears sleeping. Hundreds of them, thousands of them, each one curled up in their den, heart beating slowly, breathing slowly, warm under their extraordinary fur, safe in their leaf bed of their own making. They're sleeping through the dark and the cold and the snow. And they're not worried about anything, because their bodies know exactly what to do and have known for millions of years. And they are doing it beautifully. The world turns. The seasons turn. The bears sleep. And you can sleep too. You've heard the whole story now. You know about the autumn eating and the thick warm fat and the soft den and the slow heartbeat and the tiny cubs and the long, deep, beautiful sleep. You know about the spring and the green shoots and the cubs discovering the world for the first time. You know about Rosie. So let your eyes close, the way the bears let autumn slip into winter. Let your breathing slow down, just a little. Let your thoughts wander gently, like a bear moving through a late autumn forest, unhurried, following the smell of something sweet. Somewhere in a hillside under the snow, Rosie is sleeping. You can sleep now too. Good night.